Hello, Rachel.
Hi.
Hmm.
We
Howdy.
might be a small crew tonight.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I know, what are we in week number seven?
Seven.
Seven. This is when a lot of us begin to lose steam.
I am just coming down to a normal level of steam after starting at a much too high level of steam. So it's perfect.
That sounds really good. And how are you doing, Charlie?
I'm doing good. It looks like you're finally back at home after being on the road.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, 2 weeks ago I was in Portland and then straight to San Antonio. And then last week I hosted a conference at Fuller and then went straight to Vancouver. And it was all really, really great stuff. But I'm at home now for 3 weeks. Yeah.
Hmm.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for your flexibility on all that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I was wondering, I mean, so there's a lot of things we could potentially chat about. I mean, I think we could um, chat about our final paper ideas. That's a
Hmm.
possibility. We can continue talking about week 6 because I felt like there was even more to unpack from the spiritual abuse stuff. We can also talk about this week's readings on extended cognition. I really love Tyler Vanderweel's book chapter on religious communities and human flourishing. It's really one of the gold standard publications on that topic. We can talk about that, and or we can talk about anything else that might come to mind. Um, any ideas on how we could start our time together?
Well, I was not part of the discussion last week about spiritual abuse, and I have not yet watched that. So I don't know what you guys already talked about there. Um, I have lots of things I could say about any of these topics. So someone else can feel free to jump in if they would like to start us off.
No, you're welcome. And to be fair, I mean, I think intentionally and unintentionally, um, last week we talked about spiritual abuse, and this week we actually talked about the benefits of being in a religious community. And
Hmm. Yeah.
that's an interesting tension there.
Mhm. Yeah, so I don't know if it was just my particular week. I really like this book, Enhancing Christian Life, and I see a lot of value in what it's teaching. And even this week in like an Ash Wednesday service, I was sort of had some of the ideas from the book reverberating in my brain as I was like enjoying uh being in a group of people, experiencing worship, experiencing the ashes, thinking about how much more meaningful it was than like being at home and trying to do something on my own. Um, but then there were some parts of the book too where I was like, I feel like these guys might be pushing this too far. I feel like they're kind of taking this to a place where it's almost discounting the importance of the individual. And I
Hmm.
understand they may be overcorrecting because we are such an individualistic culture, but in particular, on page 117, they talk about in the Hebrew scriptures, God calls a people, not a person, or he calls a person as representing a people. In the New Testament, everything points toward the formation of the body of Christ, the church, as the medium for the ongoing outward focused work of God in the world. And I was sort of like, I don't know if you can just say that without backing that up. I mean, God very clearly calls Abraham, and there's some mystery behind it. And yes, he's going to make a nation out of Abraham, but also God seems to want a relationship with this guy, right? And then you have God calling Moses and he calls him to rescue the Israelites, but then God gets so mad at the Israelites that he's like, I'm going to destroy you and just make a new nation out of my man Moses, who I like better than the rest of you. And so it's sort of like, you know, I think that the church is greater than the sum of its parts, and I agree with like 90% of the book. I also just felt like maybe they said things like, the goal of all spiritual formation should be to bring something back to the body. And I was sort of like, but what about God just wanting to spend time with me? What about that? Like, doesn't God like me? And aren't we his children? Like I am not constantly wanting to spend time with my kids so that they can accomplish something or like give to the family. I'm also just wanting to spend time with them because I love them. And so, yeah, I felt like in particular for me, I wasn't feeling well this week with some of my chronic fatigue issues. And
Mm.
so that in itself was like, there are times where all I can do is take care of myself. And so
Mhm.
does
Yeah.
that not have value for the body if I'm not like bringing something back to it? So I felt like they went a little too far in some cases, or at least it struck me that way this week. But I would be interested to hear everyone else's thoughts.
Yeah. What are Charlie or Anita? Do y'all happen to have any thoughts? I have some thoughts, but wanted to see if y'all want to jump in.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, just for starters, you're a terrible sinner for questioning this assumption. No, I'm kidding. Um,
You can't get me that easily. I've already been there.
no, just kidding. I loved the book. I was thinking a lot about the idea of extended cognition and how to incorporate that. I like specifically the chapter about extension in liturgies of worship because I'm going through the Presbyterian ordination process and they're just hammering home the sacraments
Mm,
and also all of the aspects of liturgy and why they exist. Um,
mm,
but yeah, it's so interesting because yeah, historically, I just think we live in a very unique and bizarre time
mm.
theologically and church
Same.
life and
Yeah.
practice. And like the sacraments were intensely embodied.
Hmm.
And I think about the difference between having a whole bunch of people outside of a church building surrounding someone in a body of water being immersed, right?
Mm,
Mm.
Versus like the little sprinkle, like the little
mm,
like because we do the little like three things and then the cross, which
mhm,
is still nice. I just want to emphasize that's actually still nice that there's physical water touching someone and
mhm,
it's out of place. Like the kid, their hair always looks like a little bit weird afterwards.
mhm, mhm.
And there's some physical thing that has happened and some, evidence of that. Or like the little teeny tiny horrible communion cup things,
Mm,
like
yeah.
the COVID ones,
Yep.
with like a small piece of cardboard in it, versus the idea that the original the original communion was a Passover feast with
Hmm.
friends and was practiced as my wife absolutely hates this word, the love feast.
Yeah.
She's like, that can't be a real phrase. I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't make it up. That's a real
Correct.
phrase.
No, you're
I've
correct.
heard of it.
But the love feast, and that was a real meal that hungry
Yeah.
people came to eat, so much that we have discourse of Paul saying, we're not even adequately or equitably distributing the food because hungry
Yeah.
people are leaving here hungry.
Yeah.
Um, and how different that is. So,
Hmm.
like, I think there are opportunities to make the sacraments and liturgy in general
Yeah.
more of an extension, more like a hammer in your hand versus like talking about a hammer.
Mm.
And we have just trended in so many different ways towards like kind of putting a hammer, behind glass and going like, that's a hammer. Like people used to build houses with these things,
Oh
you
my
know.
gosh.
You even could build a house with this, hypothetically. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm just writing this down. I love it.
And there was another line in the same chapter that I circled, and there's so many times in class where I go, where do I want to save this information? So I have like ready access to it later. Because I
Yeah.
want to be able to cite this for like every paper I ever write. Um, but this is like page 95. It's important to note that social extension seldom happens if the church is merely a loose association of
Yeah.
independently spiritual persons.
Hmm.
And a loose association of independently spiritual persons could not be a better description of my church environment in West LA. I
Mm.
mean, we have so many different spiritual backgrounds. Like
Yeah.
we have people who grew up in a very conservative church or grew up Catholic, or people who are like pantheists like Buddha, whatever people. And the one thing that they all have in common is that they have nothing in common. You
Mm.
know what I mean? Like they all just show up and do their thing and we're polite to each other. And it's like, cool, I'm gonna go back to my life. And that was the time that we related. And now it's completely over and I'm an individual again.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's yeah, it all has been really interesting.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
I starred that as well, but I star like something on almost every page. Yeah, I so much of the book I was thinking this is so true. I understand how there's so much of Western culture has been shaped by kind of a fundamental misunderstanding, I think, of what people are and what we need. And by Western, sorry, I mean like American, evangelical, whatever. Um, this idea that, I mean, have you guys, has everyone here, sorry, this is not a tangent, it's going to sound like one, but have you guys read Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer? Anyone?
Yeah, a little
I'm
bit.
familiar, but
We're
Mm-mm.
reading it for session. I'm also in a Presbyterian community and I'm in session right now, Charlie. And the first 31 pages, I was like, oh my gosh, this is everything I've been learning for like the past 10 years. And it's all about how the way that we're like reaping what we and our ancestors have sown in terms of theology of like what you need to do is just believe the following things and then you'll go to heaven and now you're a Christian when actually
Mhm.
you're supposed to apprentice to Jesus, right? Your whole life is supposed to change. And there's this idea that we can just kind of keep our individual separateness and as long as we just intellectually, or even if you want to say it's like a belief and not just intellect, but we don't actually change, we don't actually live sacrificially. And so I was seeing a lot of crossover with this book about, um, if we're not really following Jesus, if we're not really apprenticing to him, we're not going to be in close contact with other people who are doing that. Like, and so
Hmm.
for me, it's kind of when they
Hmm.
have these conversations, it's a little bit like chicken and egg. Like there's people who want to say you have to be changed internally by Jesus to then, have the behaviors and the good works and the community. And then this is more like, no, you have to like practice in the community and that's how you're changed and formed. It's not, and I always sort of default to, well, isn't it kind of both? And isn't it kind of a mystery exactly how God works this out? Like, isn't he working on us individually and we're all interpersonally connecting and doing this soft melding thing, which it's the wrong words. What is it? Soft coupling, which I don't like.
yeah.
Ew. But anyway, um, yeah, I feel like because I don't know who these people are, but because they're approaching this from like a very scientific angle, they're wanting to like parse this out and make it really black and white. And I'm like, well, guys, also like, yes, I take with me everything I've learned from everyone in every book, but also God does things that I don't expect and I can't explain in my time where it's just the two of us. And so like, what are you going to do with that? I don't know.
Mhm. Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, Anita, jump in.
I have some thoughts, and pardon me, I have a cold, so I've been on mute. Rachel, I applaud your courage for bringing up these questions. So I had very similar questions as I listened to our reading. And in our book, it finished with the authors focusing on 1 Corinthians 12,
Hmm.
how Christ is the head. And basically, there is, as you pointed out, maybe a little bit of an overemphasis on your spiritual formation actually majorly grows in corporate worship, prayer, extended cognition, and it's far more embedded than the individual effort. So, my thoughts on that are if I step back and look at the Bible, I'm trying to teach the entire Bible to my small group with this idea that God never deviates from being an empathetic, kind, patient, unconditionally loving Father. That's from Genesis to Revelation. He doesn't change from that. And if I make him the central character of the Bible instead of my interpretation, it helps me to understand the Bible as a whole instead of taking a scripture out of context. Like, oh, he looks cruel here. Like, what is this? So I feel that fundamental to my understanding of God as an unconditionally loving God, he gives us individual free will. He will never force that, abuse us, break our free will. He will never be a dictator to be like, look, I can make you obey me against your free will. So that's where I feel that we might overdo it in emphasizing individual free will. But you have to understand our Constitution guarantees that right, unlike almost any nation in the world, to protect against tyranny, dictatorship, and spiritual abuse, most importantly, in my mind. And so while I agree with the author's points, I think they're excellent points. Spiritual community life is integral. I will not stop meeting in the assembly of church. We can't blindly submit, where if somebody wants to spiritually abuse God's sheep with this format that you can only spiritually grow here, I do not want to be so vulnerable ever again that my ability to individually voice my First Amendment freedom of speech and conscience is silenced in the name of fitting in. So I think there is a healthy tension that you point out that is integral to safeguarding against abuse. And I appreciate you, Professor Wong, that you have put all these topics so closely together, and it's up to us to connect the dots, right? Because as one of my professors put it, he's not going to tell us how to think. He's not going to tell us what theology to have. That's for us as students to wrestle out individually. We have to wrestle out, what is Rachel's theology? What is my theology? What is Charlie's theology? Like, you're going to have to wrestle that out between God and you, and nobody can do that for you. Where I do see the authors have an outstanding point is only in community can I get more and more orthodox in my theology. Honestly, I feel like Anita on her own could easily go into a cult. I'm sorry to put it that way, but it's like, on my own, I could go into the deep end. Like, I could be like, I hope not, but I feel like any of us could fall. Any of us could be like, I got an angelic vision. I'm adding this to the Bible. I'm going to canonize it on my own. And you know what? We can't do that. We don't have that authority. And so, like, I am going through all this hard work, forgiving the trauma of my past, forgiving the people that hurt me, because I'm realizing I need to still submit to church authority because I don't know it all. I will never have the whole picture of the truth on my own. I need the help of community elders and leaders to help me formulate that. And as one professor said, I was studying church history in another class, and he goes, Anita, a lot of churches in church history thought they had 100% the correct answer, how to be saved. They had exactly the orthodox theology, and they were wrong. And he goes, the truth is, we're all on a relentless search for the rest of our lives to become more and more orthodox. So how am I going to do that? I have to do that in community. So there's a healthy tension there. And I like the tension. I would never go all or nothing, either all community or all individual. I think God gave us free will for a reason, to protect us. Okay, I'm done.
Anita, I love you
Amen.
shared it.
Oh,
Amen.
sorry.
It reminded me of something, and I'm going to run off and grab it. It's a book, so I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, it sounds like you have
Talk
something
about
too,
Charlie while
Rachel.
he's gone, guys. Quick. We're not
And
talking about you, Charlie.
by the way, I love preaching. So if I'm preaching too much, you
Oh
just signal
no,
me.
that's
Like, okay.
okay. If we're
No,
all
I'm amazed that you have the ability to speak in paragraphs. Did you write that down? It was
No.
like, it was this whole flow of thought. I couldn't keep up with you and my
Oh.
typing either.
And I have another thought. I just visited my parents, and my stepmom goes, Anita, I do not believe women can be pastors.
Oh.
And I
And
had
you
to
were like,
submit. Everything in my flesh wanted to argue with her. I submitted to her. And we said at most, we agree to disagree.
Mm.
and I'm willing to learn from her.
Well, that doesn't sound like submission. That just sounds like we agree to disagree.
Yeah, but I felt like I was submitting to her wisdom because she was a missionary for 30 years, and I go, so can women be elders in church? She goes, no, no.
Mm.
And then my sister-in-law sitting there next to me going, I'm a woman and I'm a church leader. And so what I realized is God was telling me men have special authority. Pastor is just a title. And if God recognizes me, wants to promote me with a title or not, that's fine. If I'm here in Fuller because God wants me to be here and I get a title from people or not, it doesn't really matter to me. What
Mm.
matters is that I'm obeying God. If I get the title, great. If I don't get the title, that's fine. And what I realized is she was teaching me this is how the church is. And are you willing to work with people like these? And my stepmom is very loving. And there are people who believe what she believes who are not as loving. And I felt like God was teaching me, are you going to be able to get along with these people?
Yeah.
And that's from individual will versus community shaping.
Yeah.
I do not have, like you said, Professor, I do not have to submit to that community shaping. I'm like, no, I believe God can anoint women to get the title of female pastor.
Yeah, me
I
too.
don't have to submit to that. In some ways, some people use it to denigrate women, right?
Yeah.
But I can submit to experience and wisdom and love and
Mm.
agree to disagree. So it's a fine line,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And there are plenty of missionaries who don't hold her view either
Yay.
on biblical grounds as
Well,
well.
there's a lot of countries, especially in South America, as I understand it, where most of the church leaders are women because that's just who's
Mm,
in church. Like,
mhm.
there's just no
Hmm.
other option. There's not enough men. That could be changing. I don't know. But that is what I've heard and understood in the past. Okay, Charlie, what's your book?
Yeah, so I couldn't find it. It's got to be in my office, but it is because I was reflecting on what Anita said about like, wow, left around devices, I could see myself ending up in a cult, and that has been a constant question in my brain is what is the line? Where is the line? How would I know if I'd crossed it? Um, where uh, religious faith and community crosses some sort of line into being like unhealthy and insular, abusive, overly exclusive, all those things. And it's this book, it's called Cultish, and I can't remember
Mm,
the author right
Mm.
now. But it isn't specifically exclusively about cults. It's about the way language is used to create in-group identity, to create and reinforce in-group identity. And I think that actually is really related to this extended cognition and soft coupling discussion, because she talks about cults, but she also talks just as much about like CrossFit or Soul Cycle
Mm.
Mm.
or all of these other groups, Boy Scouts that have all sorts of rites of passage and external markers and costly signaling and that use very specific in-group language that wouldn't be used anywhere else, and how that's self-reinforcing. And I'm really fortunate. I came up under a mentor who had really expunged a lot of Christianese from his language. And by Christianese, I mean like in-group Christian speak. Um, and I always found that very attractive because it just made sense to me that if I ever want to hope to talk about any of this, that's extremely important to me, to someone who isn't already bought in, that's a huge barrier. Um, and then also, I think you can use like insider technical language in a really, and that's true for Christianity or for like the academy,
Mm.
to hide meaning as opposed to enhancing it, where you can like use a lot of the right jargon without actually revealing anything true or interesting. But I just wanted to share, in case you're wondering, like, Charlie, what are you talking about? Um, my friends and I have started a list of Christianese. So here are
Ooh.
things
Oh,
that
yeah.
only Christians say. So the first one is seasons. People outside the church go through chapters of life, but only in the church do we go through seasons. Uh,
I
discerning.
might disagree with you on that one, but you can continue.
Okay. Discerning. Like that, I'm discerning this, I'm discerning that. Like you're pretty much never going to hear that outside of church. I encourage you to the word testimony, obviously,
Mm,
doing life together.
mm.
Um, and loving on is my favorite. I have a friend who literally that just sounds like the most sexual thing in the world to him. He's like, I
Loving
just
on.
can't. Loving on. Yeah, he's just like, please don't ever say that. On fire. How's your walk? Above reproach. And then couples sharing a Facebook page, couples sharing a Gmail. Um, Forking is a thing that kids do to prank each other in like youth groups where they stick plastic forks everywhere. And I've absolutely never heard of that outside of the church.
Huh.
And then the words foretaste, authentic, beloved, accountability buddy. Yeah. Going through the motions. There's a few others, but
So
there you
couples
go.
sharing Facebook
Yeah.
and email accounts, is that a Christian thing?
I've only ever seen that in a church context.
Ah,
A
Mm.
bunch of
okay.
people I know do that, and I'm not sure if they're Christians or not, but I do live in an area where a lot of people go to church, like
In my very
very.
personal opinion that you don't have to agree with, that would be an example of poor differentiation. Um, but anyway, you don't have to agree with me.
Charlie, thanks for sharing that. My dad did a little bit of research on the term social psychology, and maybe Professor, you had more thoughts on that, but he has a missions organization called Kotari, which is trying to reach people in other religions. He's written like over 1,000 pages comparing the Quran to the Bible
Oh, wow.
and trying to reach Muslims for Christ through the Quran first. And if you know anyone who's interested, he's looking for a successor. So just let me know. But my dad was saying Jesus used social psychology by referencing other people's holy texts instead of like New Testament ideology in group language. And the in group language is very powerful in that Jesus went to Jews, taught their in group highest authority scriptures, and reached their hearts that way first. So my dad's methodology is use social psychology for the gospel. So instead of our in group, you go to the Muslim and speak their in group language. You speak the Quran, proving the Trinity, proving Jesus was fully God, fully man, and then you've got them. And he even said Hitler used this to the T in the most destructive form of what you're talking about, and that social psychology kind of eclipsed free will. So that in order to be the in group, it was totally destructive if you were out, right? So social psychology can be very powerful. It might be a part of all that we're studying, embodied, embedded, enacted, extended, like all of this, like can work so aggressively so that somebody is so vulnerable and dependent upon the group and the leadership and whoever's forming the group. So leaders have so much responsibility to be accountable to God and each other that am I leading this group just like Jesus would? Or is there a little bit of my ego in there? So, I've come to forgive the people who hurt me. I'm like, they probably thought they were protecting the church. They had
Mhm.
no idea that my message was actually from God, you know? Like that little bit of lack of discernment. They didn't even know the Holy Spirit was speaking through me. They only found out when COVID actually happened. So, like what's to safeguard us so that we are really accountable every step of the way?
Mhm. I mean, when I think of social psychology as it's applied to Christian leadership in communities, I do feel like um, they have an important role to model implicitly, what Christian leadership is, it looks like. And they also have a lot of influence when it comes to normalizing social norms,
Mm.
shaping social norms.
Mm,
And they do that by modeling too,
mm,
and maybe this is one of the reasons why, having for, and connecting this to maybe reading from even further back, a highly differentiated Christian leader, models a certain kind of leadership and shapes
mm.
certain kinds of social norms that tend to, in my opinion, cultivate spiritual maturity and like a healthy system. So in fact, there's a lot of empirical research that actually connects differentiation with spiritual flourishing and spiritual
Mm.
maturity. There's a whole literature. I'm part of it, some of it, but it was really spearheaded by some friends. Guy named Steve Sandage from Boston University. He actually has a whole spiritual developmental framework called the relational spirituality model, and it's a differentiation based model of spiritual formation that has quite a lot of empirical backing to it.
What's it called?
Relational spirituality.
I assume there's a book or something.
There are a few more technical books. I'm wondering if he has written something more um, less technical, but if you just search Stephen Sandage, relational spirituality,
Okay.
uh, there is a few articles that I can share with you that are free to read. Um, I'll just need a moment or two. Um, let's see. Okay, here it is. And he has some really interesting articles about penal substitutionary atonement and Calvinism and
Ooh, now you're getting me really interested.
and how a lot of these things are empirically tied to like, uh, all these outcomes that uh, generally aren't very positive. But
Hmm.
um, okay, here are two articles that y'all can consider. Just gonna drop them straight into the chat.
So, Professor, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
With all of your study, what in your mind would be the ideal healthy church leader? And what would their church look like?
I don't know if I have a perfect answer to that question or a robust one. I mean, I think we need to experiment nowadays, because the models that we have presently, which unfortunately Fuller has contributed to, because we're the source of the church growth movement. Although to be fair to, the
Wait,
founders of,
what? You're the source of the church growth movement? Tell me
yeah,
what that means. I need like a paragraph explanation of what that means.
yeah. So
Fuller is like where we got mega churches, or what does that mean? Really?
So the
Tell
the
me.
the framework and the philosophy and the practice of that created the phenomenon, the current modern phenomenon of megachurches. It all came from Fuller. So if
Wow.
you do a Google search on the church growth movement, you'll see names like Donald McGavran and C. Peter Wagner. And Donald McGavran was the dean of the School of Intercultural Studies here, back in the
Whoa.
1970s. And C. Peter Wagner was his mentee, and he was a professor here at Fuller. And um, and I think, to be fair to them, I think, they're thinking as missiologists,
Hmm.
Hmm.
thinking as frameworks for missionaries who are trying to start, inspire and start new movements of Christianity in contexts in the world, cultures in the world where nothing like that has existed before. And they talk a lot about people movements, So if one were to go to Papua New Guinea, for example, I think when you apply their frameworks, it makes perfect sense, and I think, they would lead by saying, the goal is not to create an American church in Papua New Guinea. The goal here is to lay the seeds so that a Papua New Guinean people movement can flourish, and so that new churches can spring up that were led by Papua New Guineans, and that are created for Papua New Guineans, So that's actually one of the kind of fundamental principles of the church growth movement, is that um, that the best way to grow a church numerically is to tailor the entire church experience for one specific demographic, you know.
Oh, it's like algorithms before algorithms existed.
Yes. And if you've seen some of Rick Warren's stuff, he's also a Fuller alum. He learned that, and I think he talks about what was it?
Know your audience.
Saddleback Sam. Think of who is Saddleback Sam, and you know, shape the whole church, culture around that demographic. And again, it makes a lot of sense when you're talking about cross-cultural missionaries and faraway lands to relative to North America.
Yeah.
But you can also only imagine what happens if you unleash this to a bunch of pragmatic Americans that want to have bigger churches, and you know it's we've taken it to its absurd endings, and probably is tied to a lot of the church abuse stuff that we talked about last week, you know.
Mm.
Um,
You're
but
blowing my mind.
yeah.
Um, Thank you.
And there's another, I think the formal concept that they introduce is the homogeneous unit or something like that. So it's like
It's so funny because I used to be a small business owner
yeah.
and there was so much about like who is your ideal client? You have to know who this
Mm.
person is. You have to shape everything that post has to appeal to that person and you need to do all this research and it's like man, the church I grew up in it just felt like it was run like a business in a lot of ways,
Mm.
and that's because it is like we're basically marketing. We're not relying on
Mm.
the Holy Spirit. We're like trying to make this appealing to our target audience. It's like, there you go. The American capitalist Christian movement.
Yeah,
Oof.
you turn faith into a commodity that can be bought
Yeah.
and
Mm.
sold. Um, I wish they could have anticipated how it would have been used and added some safeguards to it, but that did not happen. So we're cleaning up the mess that we
Mm.
started. So I feel like a lot of my work on, emotionally healthy leaders is actually about cleaning messes that we started a number of
Mm.
years ago here at Fuller. Yeah.
This just kind of in general, though, I feel like this is what cultures do, right? Whatever came before us, we sort of react against it. We go a different direction. And I feel like part of what we're discussing here is like, how do we not do that? How do we follow Jesus without being reactionary? Like, not being like, I grew up in this kind of cult, so I'm going to go the other way and make this other kind of cult. That's the
Mm.
opposite thing. Like, how do you stay in that? Because it's not enough to just say, well, read the Bible and follow Jesus, because it matters how the theology, how the exegesis of the Bible is taught to you. I literally thought when I was like 12 and I read the entire Bible that I understood everything in it because I was taught so clearly this means this and this means this. And I was like, okay, there were a couple times I was a little unsure, but like mostly I think I've got this. And now I just need to like do everything it says. Like, and it's wild. It's absolutely wild that there was so much pride and assumption that we could grasp things and that it was written like to our context. I mean, there was just no sense of like humility and that we have a lot to learn. And I don't know. It was about having the answers, right? It wasn't about questions.
Yeah.
Um, how did I get here, guys? I just took an off ramp. I don't know how to get
No,
back.
this is helpful. And I mean, one of the things I'm reflecting on from what you shared is, if we had a chance to read more into neuroscience,
Hmm.
like Daniel Siegel does a lot of work on neuroscience and trauma. And um, And he talks about how, he talks about like polyvagal theory, which is an interesting theory. It's, I find a lot of, I find it really helpful. And he talks about how, from a neuroscience perspective, he's arguing for that third way, that Fuller's, we're trying so hard to maintain that, occupy that third way. And on one side of this third way is rigidity, over rigidity, right? Which, many of us may have come from church upbringings that were just overly rigid, like, this is exactly what you believe, and and then he also argues that perhaps on the other side, there's an equally perplexing and challenging problem. And he labels that chaos, where, um, and I'm feeling that there are many students that come our way here at Fuller that who come with, perhaps overly rigid. This was certainly my story, overly rigid kind of initial faith formations. And then the blessing of Fuller is that we get to practice humility. We get to practice learning from people that see the faith in a much different way, and reading, lots of different perspectives, right? I'm also becoming more and more attuned to the presence of also another subgroup of individuals, within Fuller and perhaps outside of Fuller as well, where perhaps they uh, grew up on the with the opposite problem, where here are 20 different views on this, and my truth is my truth, your truth is your truth, and everyone's truth is everyone's truth, and I don't know what the heck to believe, everyone's okay. I can't impose any boundaries or it's going to be oppressive. And um, so I feel like there are actually some people who what they might need, the scaffolding that they might need the most is boundaries. Of course, the boundaries don't need to be super rigid. We're like, this is the only way, but but maybe the opposite and extreme of um, anyone can believe anything, um, and we can learn, and we can still learn from them. But uh, in psychology, if you're familiar with some of the third wave CBT therapies like dialectical behavior therapy or acceptance and commitment therapy. So in the psych school, I teach a lot of the classes on that. We'll have language like commitments within ambiguity, right? So
Commitments with an ambiguity.
yeah, like commitments within ambiguity, commitments within relativity, or commitments within, so it's like, I'm not saying that everything's black and white, and I'm also not saying that everything goes. I don't know everything, but within my limited, what I do know, the limitations of what I do know, I'm still going to commit to a certain direction, and um, it's going to be and I'm going to adjust that as I go. But I think the problem with chaos is that sometimes we can be we can be vulnerable to a freeze. It's like out of 100 options how do I choose the right one for me if they're all valid? And may end up not choosing anything because there's just it's choice overload, right? And that's in contrast to I have no choices. This is the only way. What would it look like to be somewhere in between? And that was my turn preaching.
Well, this is just makes
Preach
me think so
on.
much of parenting because
Amen.
I grew up in this super rigid context, and now we're trying to raise our kids without being super rigid. But every once in a while, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I like giving them enough discipleship? Which John Mark Comer would say I shouldn't even use that word, but um, like, am I not discipling them enough? Are we not studying the Bible enough because I'm like trying not to indoctrinate them? Like, I feel like I was indoctrinated, but then I'm like, are we supposed to indoctrinate our children? Or, I mean, like, we're supposed to teach them about God, right? But then I also firmly believe like I cannot force them to believe anything, and it's not going to
Hmm.
matter if they don't actually have a relationship with God, and I can't really control that. But
Mm,
there's this sort of like fine line between like creating the conditions for that flourishing that aren't too rigid and that aren't just chaos. Because in my house, it's very clear that no one flourishes in chaos. Like my children
mm,
are just agents of chaos, and my main job is like finding ways to create the right boundaries. Um, going back to what Anita shared at the beginning, this idea that God gives us free will, right? And yet there's like these sort of immutable laws of like how, it's like Proverbs literature, like, in general, this is what creates a good life, but you get to make your own choices, like at the same
hmm.
time.
Rachel, have you ever read the book The Connected Child?
No.
Um, I don't know if anyone else is familiar with that. I think by Dr. Catherine, I forget. It's called The Connected Child. It's taught at our church.
Hmm.
And it was initially written for foster parents with
Hmm.
kids that were adopted that were so abused that no traditional disciplinary methods helped them.
Oh.
And so she goes over the four quadrants of parenting: authoritarian, all rules, no love; permissive, all love, no rules. And there's a neglectful, which is none of that. And then the best one is authoritative,
Mm-hmm.
um, strict boundaries, but ton of nurture. So you have flexible boundaries, as professor is talking about, commitment and the ambivalence, but you always nurture them and comfort them whether they fail or succeed through those boundaries. And it's authoritative. I That was the one parenting book. Now my kids are 20 and 22. I read a lot of parenting books when I became a parent. None of them were very helpful
Hmm.
because honestly, God knows your kid and will guide you somehow. But that's the one book that I'm like, man, I wish I had read this book like
Hmm.
before I raised kids, because it balances the tension of free will
Hmm.
and discipline so well, so that literally parents with a kid who's been severely abused, they've seen some like good amount of success with her methodology.
Hmm.
It's about winning the battle to connect to your child's heart so that they of their own free will eventually meet more and more of the rules. So if they don't meet the rules, you go, hey kiddo, let's compromise. And so you always love the kid,
Hmm.
you attack the problem, you never let them feel ashamed because they've lived with that. I mean, it was remarkable. And what
Hmm.
it did is it reconfigured my image of God.
Hmm.
When we reparent our children with empathy, connection, high nurture, high authority, we're actually reparenting ourselves.
Hmm.
And that's why I'm going through the whole Bible for my small group. There's some very wounded people in our small group. And we went through the connected child. We're going to go through the whole Bible saying, God's empathetic. I never got taught the Bible that way, you know?
Hmm.
And I wanted to share quickly, if people don't mind. I told my trauma story in the first lecture. I hope you don't mind, Professor. But I actually have a good resolution coming to share that it's kind of a prayer request. So I told how at my old church, they were aspiring megachurch, I got severely spiritually abused. And I have been praying for revival in America for over 20 years. Well, we just finished 21 days of prayer and fasting, and we have a 3-day assembly, sacred assembly, based on Joel 1:17 and Joel 2. Basically, my husband and I are just on the third day where they've assembled pastors from London and who've witnessed the Ashbury, Kentucky, some guy with a PhD studying historical revivals. The senior pastor and his wife, they're literally repenting before God. Like we spent this morning weeping. I've never seen this happen in a church stage. The senior pastor's wife came out. She listed almost every single thing the American church is doing wrong. And I'm like, am I sitting in my psychology class with Professor Wong? Because I've never heard this on a mega church stage. They're repenting.
Hmm.
And like, for me, it's not the ideal picture of a self differentiated, healthy, mature it's like God is blessing me where I got severely wounded at my old church. I got spiritually abused. And I stayed there for 17 years, blindly submitting, not self-differentiating. But at this church, it just feels like closer to heaven to me. I know it's not going to be ideal. I'm there to like pray for people, to keep them accountable. That's what I feel. But people were, there was a, this is Saddleback. I mean, I'll be honest. Yes, we are guilty of being one of the biggest mega churches in America, but it has blown me away that I felt God is like, come here and pray for revival. I'm like, Lord, I'm like, not another mega church. I'm like, I don't want to go to another mega church. And I felt like he was just showing me, you pray here. And I prayed there a year and a half. We saw miracles. And the biggest miracle is that at my old church, I was praying for 17 years for the senior pastor. You got to pray for America. You got to pray for this. He ignored me for 17 years. At this church, they're doing everything I prayed for at the old church above and beyond. They are crying and weeping for another great awakening in this country. And it had me crying this morning. I'm sick and I'm blowing my nose. I've got my mask on, but I'm like weeping as an elder because I'm like, Lord, like, I'm thankful I went through so much because failure is my best teacher. So that if genuine revival happens, God, give me the humility to handle it well, to know that I did nothing to make it happen. I just failed forward. And I'm actually very hopeful. And that's my prayer request is let's pray that these leaders not mess it up. Their hearts are in the right place. And it's been a long time since I felt like I really seen. I mean, they're just endorsing so much of what I'm learning at Fuller. I'm like, these people are open, they're teachable, they're humble, they're willing to be broken for God. And so for me, like the ideal church is that humility and repentance and a place where the leaders bless people where the church has abused them. And I think that's harder. That is a more rare healing than healing from cancer or physical diseases. It's the healing of the human heart, the healing from trauma, and the healing from incurable diseases. And I think that there are godly, loving, faithful Christian leaders that are willing to be used by God for that. So I hope to be a part of that.
Oh, I can't hear you, Dr. Wang.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Oh, okay. That gives me hope, to hear that, and I hope that more people catch on to that spirit. You know,
Mm.
um, I, um, I'm sure there are failures that all of us have experienced, and I agree with you that failure oftentimes is where we are formed and where we learn the most. I would not call it the spiritual abuse you went through your failure.
Mm,
I would rather, very, vehemently suggest that that is the failure of that system and the people in that system. You can certainly be formed and learn from that,
hmm
and demonstrate Christ's heart and courage by going on your recovery journey, and when your soul is ready, to invite God's grace to help you forgive and to let go, though that oftentimes is a journey, but that is the consequences of someone else's failure.
That's true.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Charlie.
Well, first off, I want to say, hey, Emily, thanks for joining.
Hi, Emily.
Um,
Hey, Emily.
and and I just wanted to share. I remembered the second half, or the landing point of that book, the cultish book, which isn't what we're reading for the class. But anyway, it was eventually after like outlining all of these pathologies of language, and of group behaviors, pointing out that every single group has these aspects to it, and that like groups basically exist on a spectrum, and it can be really, really harmful and pathologizing. But like obviously, the church has lots of specialized in-group language and rituals and rites of passage and things like that. And after reading the book, it actually gave me more courage to and I was more willing to use inside a group language because I realized that ultimately the thing behind that is that we all want to belong,
Hmm.
that we're searching for safe spaces where we belong and we have something special. And even like friend groups have inside jokes, and tell the same stories over and over again. And so to tie it into what we're reading, I think that liturgy as extended cognition is a way that as a group we can actually continue to learn the same thing over and over again. That it doesn't happen on the first pass. It's not like uh, it's not just an idea that I pass from my head, but I have to actually act it out over and over again. And the example that they keep using, first off coupling or extended cognition, is a hammer and a hand as an extension of your mind. And I just wanted to share a funny little story about bringing students from Los Angeles down to Mexico to build homes. And it never occurred to me that they wouldn't know how to use a hammer. And I had to teach these kids how to use a hammer, and it was incredible. Like it really was this long process, and we had to take them off the work site and literally just give them nails and wood, and you could see the neural pathways being created, and they got
Mhm.
better and better throughout the weekend. And once they were able to start consistently driving nails, it was so satisfying for them, and they were like able to be part of the team. Um, but then it just doesn't happen automatically. Like it really, really takes a long time for I think extended cognition to be a part of you. And so I think that's why the idea of repeated liturgy in a community is so powerful.
Oh, yeah,
So
good point.
yeah, yeah,
It's not just that it's communal, but it's repeated.
yeah.
That's a deep formation that happens when it's both of those things. Well, I wasn't expecting our conversation to go all these really fun places. Thank you, everyone. And Emily, welcome. So glad you can join us.
Thank you. Sorry I had to come late. I got off work really late.
Oh no, you're welcome to come anytime. Just good to catch you. Well, I think that might be it for our time today, and look forward to chatting with you guys in future sessions. And hang in there. I know it's a tiring part of this the quarter, and we're fast approaching the finish line.
Yes. Thank you so much. And sorry, I just wanted to say real quick, what
Yeah.
Charlie was saying, it totally reminds me of the Bible. You know how we're encouraged to read it regularly so that w we can learn more about Jesus and stuff. And when we repeat certain scriptures, like sometimes they don't hit until later, but
Yeah,
it's like repetitive learning in that too, just like scripture. So I just thought that was really cool connection that I wanted to point out.
I love it. And I mean, this actually could be a topic for a final paper.
Hmm.
Oh, don't feel like you have to, but it's these are the kinds of things that we would love for y'all to dive deeper into for this paper.
Hmm. And I know it was late, but I just wanted to ask a quick question about the paper.
Sure, sure.
Um, I saw some of this, I saw one sample, but I didn't look at the others yet. But I wonder if the paper needs to have a specific outline or, I could just start where it starts and go from there, like a basic paper.
I think there's a lot of flexibility. I know some students will write a more kind of traditional like paper, with a thesis and like art. And I've also seen students write it more of like a journal kind of stream of consciousness kind of style.
Oh.
And in doing so, they will, kind of follow the narrative of the case that they're writing and then weave insights of like, oh, and this is where this construct, psychological construct might be. And, um, that's actually fine too. The only thing I care about is that you're weaving those two things together.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
so, yeah.
Cool.
And I think the other thing I care about is I just want this to be meaningful. I
Yeah,
don't want people to just do it for the sake of doing it so they can pass the class, but I know how busy all of us are. And if there's something that really is like an itch that's been on your heart, and it's like, oh, now I actually can build time to actually reflect on that and pray about that and really go deeper into that. I'd love for this paper to be your excuse to do that.
amazing. Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Yep, you got it. Talk to
Have a
y'all
great
next
weekend.
time.
Bye.
Take care.